Good afternoon, Chairman Keating, Ranking Member Kinzinger, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Today, at this important hearing, I will speak about situation in Georgia. I have visited Georgia's two breakaway regions of Abkhazia and South Ossetia many times in recent years, and every time I go, I see how life there is growing even more difficult and challenging. Weak local administrations are unable to provide basic services, and Russia has built up a new militarized divide hampering movement to and from Georgian-controlled territory. Allowed to fester, local problems can only raise the risk of protracted instability and further violence, with repercussions for the South Caucasus region and its people, as well as for already complicated US relations with Russia. In my testimony, I will speak about three problem areas in particular: the internal situation in the breakaway regions and Russia's role, ethnic Georgians living in Abkhazia and South Ossetia, and the situation at the line of separation. And I will begin with the internal situation. Just some examples of what the life on the ground looks like for a local resident. Last year, an old mother of my good friend in Abkhazia had to struggle with broken ribs for weeks, only because local doctors could not read the X-ray films. They did not make it on purpose. Most local doctors haven't received professional trainings for decades and often lack the equipment necessary for even the most basic health checks. Every time there is a heavy rain in Abkhazia, its main town, Sukhumi, is flooded, and rubber boats often become the only means of transport because cars can't get down the waterlogged streets. Local policemen pay out of pocket for uniforms and to fuel their cars, motivating them to seek bribes to cover these costs. Such problems dishearten local people. Nevertheless, the local elites remain broadly loyal to Russia, which is the only regional power that recognizes independence and supports the regions politically, financially, and militarily. Still, some representatives of the de facto leaderships, at least privately, express disappointment at Russia's reluctance to support the further development of the regions as viable states. Last week, I was in Moscow to discuss situation in the Georgian breakaway regions, and similar to all these years of the past decade, since Russia recognized Georgia's regions, many in Moscow appeared reluctant to increase Russia's investment. The second issue I want to address is ethnic Georgians living in Abkhazia and South Ossetia. There are around 50,000 of them, and they are 25% of population in Abkhazia and almost 10% of people living in South Ossetia. In addition to everyday hurdles, the local ethnic Georgians face discrimination from the local de facto authorities. Schools do not teach in their native Georgian language. They lack the right to run or vote in local elections, and they are kept out of many jobs. Few ethnic Georgians in these breakaways have local passports, and they are treated as foreigners. The lives of most of them are split between breakaway regions and Georgian-controlled territory, as they must cross into Georgia proper to earn a living, have access to medical care, and receive pensions. Crossings has never been easy, but in the last couple of years, it has become a bigger problem. And the de facto authorities close the crossings more often and for long periods of time with no warning and for reasons that often have nothing to do with security concerns. In fact, de facto authorities of South Ossetia have closed most crossing points since last September, and many ethnic Georgians living in the region were left with no income to buy food or firewood, and went hungry and cold with winter. Some Georgians from these regions told me that if problems with crossings continue, they will eventually have to immigrate. Finally, a topic some members of the subcommittee are well aware of, which is the process called borderization. For almost 9 years, the de facto authorities and Russian border guards have dug trenches, erected fences, and installed video cameras to define the line that separates Abkhazia and South Ossetia from Georgia-controlled territory. Some of these barbed wire fences run through the center of many Georgian villages, and I know that some of you saw this firsthand when visiting the region. That greatly affects the people in the area and provokes many new incidents that may have a potential to turn violent if they stay unaddressed. For all these years, the current Georgian government has responded with what it calls strategic patience. In light of its decision to normalize relations with Russia, Tbilisi made attempts to mitigate sources of friction that could undermine the normalization process. Consequently, the Georgian government has not attempted to stop efforts at borderization. In fact, it has even disrupted protests by its own citizens against Russia's actions. Nevertheless, there are signs that Georgia's strategic patience is wearing thin, and last August, the Georgian government established a police outpost in an area where Russian and de facto South Ossetian authorities had planned to build new barbed wire fences, which led to a serious escalation in tensions between both sides. And since then, months of talks helped to calm the situation. But if no steps are taken to resolve more fundamental grievances between the two sides, the parties could quickly find themselves at loggerheads again with the potential for violent clashes. My longer written statement offers some thoughts about how the United States can help to address each of these three areas and encourage greater stability in this troubled part of the world. And I will be happy to discuss these ideas in the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nix.